Hello, everyone. It's wonderful to be able to welcome you to this podcast in partnership with the Home Ventilation in Partnership website. The Home Ventilation in Partnership website was set up in 2019 with the purpose of improving the experience of home ventilation users, their families and carers through education and improved knowledge. We provide a resource for healthcare professionals involved in the treatment of this patient group. The website aims to provide patients, carers and clinicians with useful information on home mechanical ventilation, a treatment used to improve the quality of life and reduce hospital admissions. We're currently working on a section to support home ventilation users who are navigating this area of relationships and intimacy, and we have so far gathered some stories that are available on the website. This is a podcast that's being produced to be able to support the conversation with clinicians and staff and loved ones for intimacy and sexual relationships. So what we're going to do today is we've got a selection of questions from patients and loved ones. I'm going to talk about them as a group, and I'm incredibly pleased and thrilled to be able to introduce this amazing group of professionals with us today. We've got Trudy Hannington, who is a sex and relationship therapist. We've got Charlotte Hardacre, who's a physiotherapist in a ventilation and respiratory role. We've got Chris Stevenson, who's a patient representative and an ex-GP. He's going to be sharing his knowledge. And we've got Nick Lane, who's a respiratory home ventilation consultant. So the plan for the session, and we hope this session will be about 45 minutes, is to go through some of the questions, and we're all going to contribute, and it's going to be a very dynamic conversation, and you'll see people's hands go up and down when they've got something to add. So we hope you find it useful, and this is going to be a resource for clinical staff, for patients and for loved ones to hopefully be able to support the conversation of sex and intimacy for this population group. Okay, so we know that healthcare professionals can sometimes find it challenging and to address these conversations. So there are going to be some top tips and some resources presented at the end to be able to support these conversations in clinical practice. Our first question is, this is from a patient. Is it safe for me to be intimate or have sex while I'm ventilated? And what kind of intimacy is realistic? And are there some practical things that could help? And she writes in brackets, or he writes in brackets, like different positions, aids, or using lubricants. So I thought we'd probably start with Nick with this question, please.
Hi. Well, I think in short, the answer is yes, it is practical that you can be intimate and have sex when you're a ventilation user. And we'll talk about various things over the next, say, 45 minutes. I guess coming at it from a slightly medical, you forgive me for doing that as a doctor, a slightly medical perspective, there are some helpful and practical, easy things that you can do or you can think about that might help somebody be intimate or have sex while they're using a ventilator. So an example might be something like talking to your ventilation team about use of a nasal mask so that you can talk, that you can kiss, that you can have oral sex, these types of things. Longer tubing so that the ventilator can be a little bit further away than where it normally is. That can be relatively helpful. And it sounds like maybe an unusual thing to say, but if you have humidifier, taking the humidifier out temporarily, just so that if anything gets knocked over, you've not flooded your ventilator with water and are panicking about that. There are some different positions as well that can be helpful, and Charlie might have, as a physio, better kind of conversation to say about that. But there are absolutely things to do. One of the things that we do in Newcastle with some of our patients is some of our ventilators have more than one profile. So you can have a kind of profile, which is what you use day to day. And then sometimes people have a profile for if they've got chest infection, for example, their settings might be different. Well, you could talk to ventilation teams about having, for example, a sex profile in which some of the alarms might be disabled. It's not something you'd want to stay on permanently, but where the alarms are disabled, and so you're able to be intimate, have sex without having to constantly worry about the silencing the alarms or those getting in the way. Another thing is, I guess, about taking it relatively easy, taking breaks. And sometimes planning breaks into intimacy so that you can get your breath back and yeah.
Thank you,
I don't know
Charlie.
if you have anything to say, Charlie.
Yeah, Charlie,
Yeah.
anything to add?
Thank you. So from a physio perspective, we want to be looking at optimizing ventilation, but also managing fatigue. So I think when we're looking at positions, side lying is really beneficial, because what that does, it kind of offloads your respiratory muscles by giving an opportunity to ventilate posteriorly, which means that's a larger surface area for better gas exchange. It also means that gravity assists by just allowing your abdominal content just to kind of get out the way, so you can also then distend your diaphragm to really offload your respiratory muscles. And because you're inside lying, you're fully supported by the bed. So again, you're kind of, the demand on your muscles is kind of reduced. So that really helps with fatigue. The same can kind of be said for 3/4 supine lying. So you can use pillows to support. So again, you're just offloading all your muscles to reduce that work of breathing. But again, it just allows opportunity to not restrict your chest or your abdomen, so your diaphragm can fully distend, which helps kind of improve your your functional residual capacity, which really helps breathlessness and breathing. So those two positions are really helpful. I think from a side lying point of view, if you have a tracheostomy, you have to just be aware of it, that you fully support the tracheostomy. That can be with flexible catheter mounts and stuff like that, and supporting with a pillow. So just being mindful of that. But again, I think Nick kind of touched on it. It's also thinking about pacing. So having a way that you're communicating with your partner when you just need a pause. So just thinking about that. I think also a really useful tip is looking at what time of day is useful for you. So when your fatigue levels are at the highest, and kind of planning around that. So just managing your overall fatigue. And those tend to be quite helpful tips. And I know Nick's just kind of touched on having things like longer tubings, bigger parameters in your alarm setting, alarm volumes and things like that. They're also really practical tips that you can use.
I'm going to ask a question about 3/4 supine lying, because I think probably there might be patients who might not know what that means. So can you visualize that for us and kind of give us some examples of where to put pillows? And then after that, I was wondering, Trudy, one of the questions that the patient also added was about using aids or using lubricants. Can you give us some advice about what aids or what lubricants might support with the fatigue and a pacing element? Thank you.
So from a 3/4 lying, you're thinking about your body being about 45-degree angle. So you're on your back with 45 degrees, and you can have pillows wherever that make you feel comfortable. You could have them in a V-shaped position behind you. You could have them supporting your upper limbs. Again, if it feels comfortable, having one underneath the knees, just something where you feel completely supported, but that 45-degree angle just allows enough opportunity to relax your abdomen. And again, you're not restricted from your chest or your abdomen, and just allows that diaphragm to kind of just descend naturally.
Thank you. That's great. Trudy, anything extra we can talk about aids to support pacing and to support, making it a comfortable experience?
Yeah, one of the things I'd like to say is if we just backtrack slightly, I think everything Charlie and Nick said, absolutely brilliant. It's exactly what I'd be suggesting for my patients when I've seen them in the clinic or in these sort of scenarios, is that for some couples, they may not have been intimate for quite a long time and they're quite scared about that. So even just being sex positive, encouraging them to have quality time together as well, where healthcare professionals might not be around, or family members that are all trying to be helpful, but actually the couple probably just want space for themselves and be able to create that atmosphere. So I would encourage couples to start even just holding hands together, maybe some nice eye contact. If it is possible to kiss, how that kiss might be. I think, as Charlie mentioned about the position, so being on your side, that spoon position can actually be really intimate. If the partner is cuddled up sort of behind them, you can kiss around the neck, stroke on the back, maybe just holding their hair, stroking their arms. You can still get to chest or breasts, things like that as well. In terms of lubricants, I'll not mention the name of it, but we don't want sticky gel type. That would be the most commonly used in the NHS, but what we want is nice products. So the Yes company, who are very generous at giving out samples. So their website is called Yes, 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 which I think is a great name for a wonderful lubricant, is that they do a oil-based and a water-based. And if you mix the two together, it makes it more slippy and slidey, really comfortable. It's also organic as well, so you're much less likely to get any kind of negative reaction, no stinging, no burning, very natural to use, feels really nice on the skin for both men and women. And they also produce an anal lubrication. So if somebody's wanting to experience anal sex, again, that will make everything much more comfortable for them as well. I think in scenarios like this, it's quite nice to use a vibration as well. So vibrators, which they don't all have to be phallic shaped. They're not necessarily to be used internally, but externally. Could even use them on different parts of the body. Makes arousal a lot easier, a lot faster to enable that to happen. You can start very slow until you get used to that sort of feel, then turn it up as you would want to get an experience that you would feel. But I think also to create the atmosphere, because there will be medical equipment, we can't change that. But what we could do is add in nicer cushions, so maybe nicer fabric or colours, so like maybe velvet or whatever colours makes you feel nice, whether that's dark or pastels, or, and again, lighting, just dimming the lighting slightly. Lighting candles, obviously we don't want to set fire to anybody, but you can now buy battery remote controlled coloured candles, nice smells in the room, so it doesn't feel as medical. So I encourage my couples to plan ahead. And some people say, oh, we don't want to plan to have sex, it doesn't feel very spontaneous. But one of the nice things about planning is when it's a boring Monday and you think, oh, we've got a hot date on Wednesday afternoon, no visitors, no medical staff coming round, we're going to create that atmosphere and we're going to be a couple again. We're not going to be patient and carer. We're going to be a couple, and we're going to shelve all of that, and we're going to create that atmosphere and feel good when we're in it. And we're going to be our intimate selves that we want to be. So I think if you get those basics right, I think is just as important. And for the medical staff, I would be encouraging them to say to clients, would you like us to look at your week ahead and think where you could have some private time? So people don't even have to say the word sex, but time to just be a couple where you're not this patient and carer, or there's nobody coming round, you know, you've got space for privacy, whatever you might want to do in that time. So I think even if staff were sex positive in that way by mentioning the topic, even if they feel a bit uncomfortable about saying the word sex, it's just raising it of, we think this is important for you, gives the patient, the client, the permission to say that would be lovely. Yeah.
Absolutely agree. And I think what's really important there is it also allows for pacing, and it also allows for it to be part of the weekly plan. So if you've planned it and you've thought about it, then you can plan how much energy you've got to do all the other things that you've got to do that day. And I think scheduling it can feel tricky. And I think when you're having to have that scheduling conversation with more than just your partner, that can also feel embarrassing, can't it? So I think maybe it's about, as a healthcare professional team, saying to patients, how are you and your partner having intimate relationships? Is there anything we can do to support that? Is there any timing issues? Is there any equipment issues? Can we get you any extra extensions for bits of equipment? All that kind of stuff. I think having that conversation is really important. And that's beautiful, Trudy, because you've led us on perfectly to question 2, which I think probably you've covered, which was, my carer is also my partner. How do people usually manage that balance, and how might my condition or treatment affect my relationship with my partner? Have you got anything else you want to add, Trudy, about that, or shall we?
Yeah, I think if they are still fairly able, that they can go places, still do things, then I think if you can still do nice activities together, whatever they might be. Maybe, you know, they can't go out for long, but even just sitting in a garden together, it's that quality time. Try and get life as normal as possible. Even just shift into a different room, if that's a possibility, where it's a nice sofa, and maybe they create the atmosphere as though they're at the cinema. So get the lights off and close the curtains, gadgets out the way, put a movie on, make some popcorn, eat chocolate, whatever it might be, but to create nice quality time where you do other things. Maybe you can't do what you used to do, but what we have to do is adapt rather than feel so much sadness for what we've lost. It's what can we do now, and not focus so much on performing, but on participating in what's able, really. So it's separating that time, quality time, creating the atmosphere, still doing things together, I think is just as important.
Thank you, Judy. Chris, have you got anything to add?
Yeah, I find the specifics very interesting, but coming from a general background, I tend to think about the more chronic picture, how the patient and the partner have got here, and everybody's an individual in that sort of thing. But whatever's happened, chances are that patient and partner have been through an awful lot and have been extremely ill, either suddenly or gradually got worse. You're thinking about this now on the ventilator because you're feeling better. That's an important thing. You've got to be feeling better. And I think what comes from that is that each patient and each carer's history may not be at the same place. So I think what's really important is the two individuals think and talk about what they would want, what they would like to try, and just try and be open with each other, but also keep a sense of humor. You know, the act itself is absolutely ridiculous. So, let's have a laugh as you go along and relax and find out what you think might work for you. If that means doing it on your own, fine. But then introduce something else into with your partner. But it's important that you start the process because you're in parallel. Your ship's in the night in parallel, and you want to bring these two ships together, so they're the same speed, thinking the same things, and hopefully getting something out of it. I would actually also say, if you're getting something out of it, that's great, and you can build on it. It's not going, the fireworks aren't going to immediately go the first time you try something, but build on it and learn and find out what people like, and keep talking, keep thinking, and keep smiling.
And I think you're absolutely right. I think that communication element can sometimes be really challenging, can't it? Because in relationships, when somebody's become unwell or because they've had a significant change in their health status, it really alters the balance in relationships with caring and with responsibilities. And the person who might be supporting the family both domestically and financially, there might be, there's fatigue. It's such a complex issue, and you're absolutely right. You can't unpick it, and there's not a one size fits all.
The patient on the ventilator may be feeling much more relaxed and much better than the carer, or the partner, because they're still waiting for a wheel to fall off. So absolutely, it's important that everybody gets on board and starts the process. It's not a let's throw the snakes, let's throw a six and let's see what happens. It's important to work through it. And also from a clinician's point of view, I think it's important that if possible, you keep your poker face on, because there's nothing so surprising as what patients will tell you. And you may go, really? But actually what you've got to say, that's really interesting. How can we make that work, and how can we move on? And none of us as clinicians or old clinicians, as in my case, know everything. But generally, we've got a resource that we can find, either a colleague or something that's available on the net, and find an answer. You don't know all the answers all the time.
Absolutely. And I think it's using those partnerships that's so important. I had a patient in clinic recently who said that one of the challenges they had, so I work in a critical illness capacity, I'm an intensive care nurse, that a patient who came home said, well, he called the wall of pillows in the bed, the Berlin Wall of pillows. And he said, the challenge I have is I can't get over the Berlin Wall. And when he first said it, I was like thinking, I don't really know what you mean, sir. Tell me what the Berlin Wall means. And actually the Berlin Wall of pillows just meant that he had put he had put the pillows around his partner because he was so scared of hurting her.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think that's a massive thing for couples.
Yeah.
And that kind of leads us into our next question, which is how can we support patients to feel more confident and attractive in their body? This is a patient saying, I don't feel very attractive or confident in my body anymore. How can I overcome this? And how can we support that kind of intimacy, of that fragility that sometimes carers have for their loved one who's been unwell, that they're so anxious that they don't want to touch them just in case they set off the ventilator, or just in case it affects their breathing, or just in case, in my case, in our patient group, oh my God, she'll have another heart attack, or she'll have another stroke, or whatever.
The partner doesn't want to break them.
Absolutely. And having that conversation can be challenging. Charlie or Nick, have you got any top tips?
I was just going to say, it is all about that communication, isn't it? And it doesn't have to be a verbal communication. It's kind of just saying, if I touch your hand twice, that means I just need to slow down or have a pause, or that eye contact. I don't always think it has to be verbal communication in that moment. And it is just having that conversation beforehand. And there are things that your team can do, and then probably Nick will go through it, but we can add bigger parameters so the alarms aren't going off if the respiratory rate's going up or anything like that. So again, just giving confidence that the ventilator is there as an enabler. It's not a barrier, and that is the biggest thing. And I think we just have to, it's all about education and communication, I think.
The patient, before they were on the ventilator, wasn't feeling as well as this, so it's a case of building on the improvement.
Yeah, that's exactly right, Chris. The idea of the ventilator is about trying to improve quality of life and energy and stuff. So I guess it comes to what everybody said, is actually having for a ventilation team or a physio team or a care team to be able to try and facilitate more intimacy. There need to be conversations, don't there? So people have to say, this is kind of what I'm thinking, this is maybe what I'm wanting, I don't know, but how could we explore this? Is there anything you could do? And yes, we can do things with ventilators, tubing, mask interfaces. There are some other things to think about. Ventilators are put on patients with all manner of different conditions, and it might be if you for example have COPD or something like that, having your inhalers close by so that you can take a puff of your inhaler before or mid intimacy. Some patients are ventilator dependent, and so will need to have their ventilator on, but some might not need to have their ventilator on, but could have it close by for a few breaths if they got too out of breath and their respiratory rate became uncomfortable. Sometimes holding the ventilator, not strapping it onto the face, just holding it, can be a helpful way of slowing down their respiratory rate. And so things about oxygen, I guess a couple of things about oxygen. One is that it's safe to use during sex, and whether you're a long-term oxygen user or maybe an ambulatory oxygen user, somebody who uses oxygen when they're undertaking physical activity, that's both of those are safe to use during sex. The only thing I would say about that is, and it goes back to what Trudy was saying about lubricants, paraffin-based lubricants shouldn't be used in patients who are oxygen users, who should use water-based lubricants, just because paraffin is so flammable. So we always say to anybody who's using oxygen, don't use paraffin-based, whether it's Vaseline on their lips for chapped lips or whether it's a lubricant, avoid that. And there are things as well, and Chris probably has done this thousands of times through his career, but actually things like talking to GPs about things like Viagra or that can be helpful for kind of maintaining erections and kind of improving sex. So I think those are my main kind of additional points I'd say there.
I think it's also really important to say that sex isn't just about penetration and about erections. It's about everything else that is around that. And I know Trudy and I, we've spoken a lot about this previously, haven't we? I wanted to ask one of the specific questions that was the patient is talking about here is, I don't feel very attractive or confident in my body anymore. How can we help patients have conversations? How can we support them with conversations with their partner about how their body may have changed, how, you know, how they look different and they're going to feel different? How can we have those conversations or support patients and loved ones to have those conversations?
I think for when I've worked with patients in this scenario in my clinic, is that either I've gone out and done a home visit or they've come to the clinic themselves and brought their portable ventilator with them, is that they will say, talk a lot about not using their nice things anymore, or not wearing their, just for an example, nice underwear anymore because they don't go very far, they're not really going out. What's the point of putting a bit of makeup on or a bit of perfume or aftershave or whatever it might be? So it's sort of how they feel as well. And I think at some point along the way, as Chris said, as they start to feel better and start to feel sexual, it's about reclaiming your sexuality. So, you know, in the with the ability that I've got, what kind of sexual person do I want to be? How will that person behave? What would they enjoy? And sort of try and get a visual on what is possible. So for me as the therapist, I will take them step by step of what is okay, what do they fear, what might work, what code they could use. Is it a squeeze of a hand to stop? Is it a you know, kind of holding on to somebody in a different way that says, I just want to stay with a cuddle for now? So those little messages, doing it in different ways rather than it be heard as a negative. So I will encourage patients to use the nice things and wear the nice things. And, you know, products for some people mean a lot, you know, so even if you're not going out, put a bit of lip gloss on if you're able to use a product like that, or a little bit of perfume, as long as it's near a ventilator that you know is not going to cause any issue. Even just wearing your nice underwear, people feel better. It's that, you know, from inside, what can we do that makes us feel more like a sexual person or more attractive to our other person? There are some things we will just have to accept that we can't change, but how can we adapt it or embrace it or do something different with it? You know, I think that's the important thing.
The patient journey, one, to find out that you are available to help, and two, to get to your door is huge, isn't it? You know,
Yeah.
to actually admit there's a problem, talk to somebody, and then find out there's an outlet. A problem shared is a problem halved, is the old thing, and nothing's changed. You know, the more we talk about it, the better we are. Us Brits have got to learn to give it more of that.
Absolutely. I mean, I am fortunate because I work in it's a private clinic, but I have contracts with the NHS. So the doctors are aware of me, they can refer in, the hospital departments know about me. And there are services, not as many as there should be, but across the country within the NHS. There are low-cost therapy available. You know, most therapists will hold 1, 2, maybe up to 6 spaces, pro bono sessions for situations like this. I know I certainly do. The students in training are always looking for placement, so it will be free to see. And, you know, we've all been students. And, you know, my opinion is, certainly the students I pick, is that they go all out to be the best that they possibly can. They cut a lot less corners, they put a lot more effort in. So I'd be snatching the hand off of a student in the right setting to be able to work with patients like this as well. So even if there isn't an NHS service where people are, there is something called, I'm sure you'll know about it, Chris, being a GP, is the individual funding request. Mm-hmm. Now, this is available all the way across England, and a GP or a healthcare professional can put in an application. It's not a difficult form to fill in and say, we don't have the specialist service. Given the situation of this patient, they would need a specialist. Therefore, I'm requesting funding for them to be able to see within whichever private clinic that might be. And I've got to say, I've never had one turned down. So if they're
that's interesting. Is that a bit of a postcode lottery, or is that a general response that you know about?
Well, I get them from out of area, from
Yeah.
where outside my NHS area. So it's, I guess I only get the ones where it's been said yes to. But if you've got a good GP or a healthcare professional, you would argue that cause of saying, why would you go back, appeal it, find out. Sometimes as well, even just having leaflets that you give a patient at home that mentions intimacy in there, and to say at any point, here's a list of resources, but at any point you want to talk to your healthcare provider, they are more than happy. They've done some basic training. They're very, they may not have all the answers, but they can go away and find out. So I encourage people, even if you don't work in a medical setting, you can create a virtual team. So get in touch, with other services in the area where you are, see what's available, what's possible, and link up with people.
That's right. You've got a friend you don't know, but you might have got a friend who might know.
Absolutely, totally agree. There's
I certainly didn't know that was available as what do they call it? An extra contractual referral. They used to be called, I think. But that's very worthwhile knowing. Although it still takes a little bit of there'll be a little bit of reticence from the patient to actually go to the GP. A different relationship again, but again, the more we talk, the better it is.
Sometimes there might be possible for self-referral as well. So again, anything that the healthcare professional can find as in resources locally, pop that into a little packet that you give the patient, saying there's lots of leaflets in here. I don't want to bombard you, but the next time I come, if there's some that you want to go through, I'll go through them with you. Or, it's being sex positive. That's the most important thing, that we do that.
So talking about sex positive environments, what top tips have we got for clinicians or patients? So what top tips have we got for clinicians on the call or watching this to be able to support them to create an environment that's a sex positive environment? And what top tips have we got for patients about raising the question? Because I think I have patients. So I had a patient in clinic last week who was, we were about 2 minutes in and he'd sat down and the first thing he talked about was impotence. Right. Well, the problem is I've got the two problems I've got to discuss with you, Kate, are this, and then the second one is impotence. And he's an exception. He was somebody who brought that to the clinic very, very quickly, but I don't think that's true of all of our patients. So what tips can we give our colleagues on the call to be able to support them creating a sex positive environment? And if you as a patient are coming to a clinic and you want to have a conversation about it, what top tips can we give to patients about introducing the topic if you think that you're embarrassed or you think that your clinician might be embarrassed? If I start with Nick.
Just unmuting myself there. I think it's difficult to have a blanket answer for that because everybody comes from a different angle and did a different journey. I guess this webinar hopefully will start that for some clinicians and for some patients as well, and realise that actually as a clinicians, GP, patient, physio, therapist, nurse, that we're all open to talking about this, and like Chris says, we're pretty good at keeping a poker face. So patients ask us some much more unusual stuff than anything about sex or intimacy, and we managed to keep a poker face. So we should be able to about this and then to discuss things. One of the things that we have in our chest clinic in Newcastle, and I'm not sure this is the right or a good answer really, but there is some resource from Asthma and Lung UK, which used to be the British Lung Foundation's renamed, and they've got a really helpful resource both online and printed about sex and breathlessness, and some of the kind of positional changes that Charlie talked about are there's kind of images, there's diagrams of what those positions look like and things to think about. But actually one of the things we have is just a poster in the waiting room that says, are you worried about sex or your relationship? Feel free to talk about it. Now, whether anybody actually looks at that, I don't know. It's not something that has been asked of me frequently in the non-ventilator clinics, but I think with home ventilation patients, we often we see them a bit more. There's a bit more going into people's homes. You get to know sorry, my ear just dropped out. Get to know the patient and the family a little bit more. So I think sometimes that makes it easier to then say, actually, how are you? How's the relationship side of things? Oh, when did you guys when did you guys let's get rid of the kids for the evening, that type of thing. So there's no, I don't think there's a good individual answer, but certainly making sure that as clinicians, we've got some of those resources, like Trudy says, ready, printed in the cupboard, ready to go, not necessarily even in the cupboards. GP surgeries will have walls and walls of information about, cholesterol and eating one of your 5 a day. So making sure that on that kind of plethora of information that's freely available is something about intimacy and sex and local services. And then building up a relationship where the patient or the carer or the family member, whoever it is, feels safe to broach intimacy with you and actually sometimes just asking. We ask about all sorts of things that are deeply personal to patients and deeply private all the time. So this shouldn't need to be anything different.
I would absolutely agree. I bring it up in every outpatient clinic that I have with patients after intensive care, because I think it's something that sometimes patients can feel worried about talking about. So if you broach the question first, and you can do it in a talk to me about your bladder and bowels, talk to me about how you're going to the loo, talk to me about how your relationship is, and then it breeds naturally from that, and it can be as much or as little as the patient needs and wants, and you can just say, leave it open for them. If you want to come and have a conversation, we're here. There's no question that you're going to ask that we haven't heard before, and if I don't know the answer, I'll find the answer for you. And I think it's so, as you said, Chris, it's okay not to know all the answers, because you're going to be dealing with people who've got all kinds of life experience and will be trying and doing all kinds of different things. So you might not know all the answers, but you can find somebody who will be able to help. Charlie, have you got any top tips?
Yeah, just exactly that, Kate. You've just got to create an environment and a space that it allows it to be, that conversation to be led. And I think for me, being a physio, I find it naturally comes into quality of life, hobbies, activities, and what are you struggling with? Is your breathlessness affecting anything like your hobbies or your activities of daily living, your intimacy? And I think you're tagging it on, but again, not making it solely about intimacy. You're just creating space, and then it allows anyone to kind of have that conversation there and then. But again, it just plants that seed of, okay, I might discuss that next time I see you. But also I find, particularly when I'm doing more advanced care planning conversations, and when I'm, talking to the partner who might be caring as well, just asking, and how are you doing? How are you making time to protect your relationship together? That's not necessarily, going into specifics, but you're just kind of, again, just allowing that to drip feed that kind of conversation. So that's kind of how I would go about it. And I find that a little bit more comfortable for me and for them, really.
Thank you. Trudy?
Yeah, I would agree that it's having that sex positive clinic, even if it's prior to any surgery that might cause them to be on a ventilator. So in advance of any treatment that might happen, as well as during and post treatment, is to say to patients, this, in my experience, it can have a huge impact on your relationship at any point. We're all trained to talk about that. Leaflets, little stickers, maybe scan codes that link them up to resources. One of the best places is in the toilets, not just in the waiting room. So on the back of the toilet door, on the mirrors, in the actual toilets, because people are a bit reluctant to walk over maybe and pick the leaflet up, but you could have leaflets on all sorts of things, and then a resource pack in an envelope that says all of the above is in this envelope. So somebody could be picking one up that's to do with something totally different if they took the whole resource pack. So there's that. And as I say, I think scanning a code is a great idea, because then nobody knows quite what resource that they were thinking they were going to have. But yeah, not just in the waiting rooms, but also in the clinic room. So where they're going to see the consultant or the specialist or the nurse, anything like that, so that it's everywhere around the clinic. But as Charlie said, make that part of everything else. So tag it in there, but high up on the list. So, is it affecting this, affecting that? What about intimacy? Are you struggling with that at any point? A lot of people do talk to me about that, or, and And the patient might say, oh, it's the last thing I'm thinking of at the minute. Just say, I'm sure it is. So acknowledge that. Yeah, sure it is. But at any point, whenever you're ready or you feel, you want to talk about that, we do have some training. We certainly have resources or referral pathway that we can pick that up. We wouldn't want you to not talk about it. They would be my big tips.
And that leads us on perfectly to the final question that we're going to cover today, which is from a patient. Are there any resources, services or specialists who could support me and my partner with this? And is there funding available, and how do we access the resources? So Trudy, what are your kind of top resources that you offer or you suggest that patients access?
So the College of Sex and Relationship Therapies is the governing body where they won't just be a general counsellor. They will have done a lot more years to train as a sex and relationship therapist. So there'll be specialists on there, and there are different levels of accreditation, but they are the registered body where you're getting somebody that is qualified as sex and relationship therapist rather than a general counsellor that might cover a little bit of it. So I think they do need specialist service. Wherever your clinics are, find out what service have you got on the NHS, and if there isn't one, how can you access some funding? And that might be, as I said, there's the IFR route that people can take, maybe certain conditions like cancer organisations, things like that, that may be willing to give some funding. It's 10 minutes of somebody's time, isn't it, to Google sex therapists in my area and get a list of them, approach them as a professional saying, how does it work? What's the cost? Do you do any pro bono clients? And make those strong links. Create your own virtual clinic so you've got your own resources. There are lots of, there's the Yes Company, as I mentioned, with lubricants, and they do some nice like body wash products, things like that. If you've got trouble with skin or anything, that will send samples certainly to clinics as well as the patient themselves. They can apply direct and they will give that. But I think it's quite nice if in your clinics you've got samples to be able to give out. There are lots of sex aids that you can buy now. There's a very nice one called pelvicrelief.co.uk. That's a nice website that do some vibrators, some where vaginal shortening is taking place, that they do something called O-nuts that go over either a toy or a penis if you want to experience some penetration but can't go very far. And just in terms of natural vaginal health, they do quite a lot of products. Love Honey, quite nice. They do novelty little games and little toys as well as vibrators. They do penile rings to help maintain erections. As Nick mentioned, there are different PD5 inhibitors. So if the short-acting drugs such as sildenafil, which was Viagra, they do tadalafil, which is a longer-acting. So you get 36 hours, so there's not as much pressure. They even do a daily dosing, so a man can take a very small dose every day, so that, again, it can be a bit more spontaneous. This tends to help reinstate morning erections, which lots of men really do like. It's like the best friends back in the morning, and when they just check if the plumbing's working, it's like waving at them. So most men quite like that. So there are more than one option to have with that. And again, a sex therapist should have a good awareness of that, and certainly your GP certainly would. And these are all available now on the NHS because they are generic, and so the patent's finished on those as well, so they're quite cheap and easy to get those on a prescription, as well as Amazon sell great sex toys that come in a brown box. Nobody's going to know. It's just an Amazon parcel. And hey ho, most are on Prime as well. So yeah, if you've made your mind up today, it can be there tomorrow.
Thank you. Chris, anything from a general practitioner perspective?
I think the most important, silence is useless. The most important thing, even if you don't know what to say, is to say something. Because if you say something, it opens the door and then you can see where it leads. There isn't a perfect question. There isn't a perfect opening gambit. Say something and see where it goes. We are very fortunate as clinicians in that for a patient to get the best out of us, they've got to be brutally honest. If they fib, they don't get as much use out of us. So that basic relationship is something that's central to any caring relationship, and gives us an extra way in. We can actually bring up subjects that other people wouldn't, family members wouldn't. So when in doubt, say something.
Thank you. Nick, have you got any resources that you use in clinic or recommend to your patients or colleagues?
Really just the ones that we've already mentioned. In clinic, we have the stuff from Asthma and Lung UK. There's lots of different charities for different conditions. So there's things like the MND Association, there's the lung fibrosis, there's lots of different ones. And each of those will have slightly different nuances and bits of advice that a different condition might not have to consider. So actually just having a quick Google, and you can always if you're worried about it, you can put your phone in, as a patient, into private mode so that people can't see your history. In clinic, actually, all of these associations, lots of stuff that's filtered on NHS computers, but actually all of these associations and charities are easily accessible through work. So, and all of them will send information, so we can get those packs of information, like Trudy says. But I think Chris has really hit the nail on the head just by saying, actually, the most important resource is yourself, not because you'll have the answer, but it's just offering a route to getting the answer, or saying, oh God, I don't know actually, but I'll try and find out. And people respond really well to, we want honesty from our patients, so they respond really well to honesty from us as well. So, yeah. So saying, do you know what? Don't know that one, or actually, I've had this experience before, and we've found this helpful is really the only thing to add. It's not really to add.
No, it's perfect. Anything to add from a CSP or from a physiotherapy specific angle?
Exactly, the charities that everyone's mentioned, I think that's what we mostly would go to. Yes, you can do all your breathlessness stuff with the ARCP stuff. Yes, there's that. But I'm just echoing what Chris and both Nick have said. We are the most useful resource for, anyone in that situation, because we are creating, or we should be creating, space and opportunity. And your ventilation team will have interfaces that will be more appropriate for different things. So again, it's talking to your specialist team, and then if they don't know, they'll direct you. But yeah, exactly what everyone else has said.
Thank you. So that's the end of our questions. I just want to say that all of the resources that we've mentioned today will be uploaded up onto the website, so you will be able to use it with your patients, with your and with your colleagues, to be able to support your practice. And that the only other thing that I thought about from a resources perspective is that I do some work with the Community Rehabilitation Alliance as well, and that's a collection of 65 charities that are working specifically in the rehabilitation space. And I think there's huge resources across the UK, and I think we aren't ever going to have all of the answers. So use the Community Rehab Alliance resources as well. I'd like to thank everyone on the call for their time and for answering these questions so incredibly eloquently. And I think we hope that you found it a useful webinar, and we look forward to seeing you again soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
All right. Good luck, everybody.